Freddie Mercury had never encountered anything like this in his career. When he saw that crying little fan, his heart broke, and what he did with her on stage is remembered as one of the most beautiful moments in rock history. Picture this. Wembley Stadium, July 13, 1985. It's exactly one day before Queen's legendary Live Aid performance, and 72,000 people have packed into London's most iconic venue for what many consider a dress rehearsal for the most important concert of their lives. The energy is electric, the crowd is deafening, and Freddie Mercury is doing what he does best, commanding the stage like the rock god he was born to be. But sometimes, the most powerful moments in music history happen when a superstar notices the smallest person in the biggest crowd. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, because what you're about to witness will restore your faith in the magic of human connection and show you why Freddie Mercury had the biggest heart in rock and roll. Tonight, we're revealing the untold story of the London miracle that had grown men crying and changed how an entire generation understood the power of seeing and being seen. This isn't just about stopping a song. This is about the moment when a rock legend proved that sometimes the most important person in the room is the one who needs you most. The evening had begun. Like any other Queen concert, Freddie strutted onto the stage in his iconic white outfit. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause, and for the first 90 minutes, everything was textbook perfection. They'd powered through their biggest hits, the audience was singing every word in unison, and the band was locked in that magical zone where everything just flows effortlessly. It was during their acoustic segment, when the massive arena had settled into a more intimate atmosphere, that something extraordinary caught Freddie's attention. As he sat at his piano, preparing to perform one of their most emotionally powerful ballads, his eyes began their usual scan of the crowd, making that personal connection that had made him legendary among performers. That's when he saw her. About 20 rows back, slightly to the right of center stage, sat 8-year-old Emma Thompson. But Emma wasn't singing along like the other children in the audience. She wasn't smiling, or waving, or showing any of the excitement typical of a young Queen fan. Instead, she was crying, not the emotional tears of someone moved by music, but the heartbroken sobs of a child carrying pain far too heavy for her small shoulders. Emma's story had begun 6 months earlier in a small hospital room in Manchester, where her mother, Sarah Thompson, lay dying of cancer at the age of 34. Sarah had been the biggest Queen fan Emma had ever known, filling their home with the band's music from the moment Emma could walk. Their evening routine had always included dancing around the living room to Don't Stop Me Now and singing Bohemian Rhapsody together before bedtime. As Sarah's condition worsened, the doctors had given the family devastating news. She had perhaps 3 months to live, maybe less. It was then that Sarah had made her daughter a promise that would bring them both to Wembley Stadium on this July evening. "Emma, sweetheart," Sarah had whispered from her hospital bed, her voice weak but determined. "I want you to promise me something. When I'm not here anymore, I want you to go see Queen live. I want you to hear Freddie sing our songs, and I want you to remember that every time you hear that music, I'll be right there with you." Sarah Thompson had spent her final weeks planning this concert experience for her daughter. She'd saved every penny from her disability payments, asked family members to contribute in lieu of Christmas presents, and even started a small fundraiser at Emma's school. By the time she passed away in April 1985, she had managed to secure not just tickets to the Wembley concert, but front row seats that would ensure Emma could see everything clearly. The tickets came with a letter that Sarah had written to her daughter, to be opened on the night of the concert. Emma's father, David Thompson, had been dreading this evening for months. How do you take your 8-year-old daughter to see her deceased mother's favorite band and expect her to have a good time? Dr. Patricia Williams, a child psychologist who happened to be attending the concert with her own family, later observed Emma's behavior throughout the evening. "What I witnessed was a child caught between grief and obligation," she explained. Emma wanted to honor her mother's memory, but being there without her was making the loss feel fresh and and overwhelming. As Queen performed their opening numbers, Emma had tried to be strong. She'd attempted to sing along to the songs she knew by heart, the same songs her mother had taught her. But with each familiar melody, the absence of her mother's voice beside her became more noticeable, more painful. By the time the acoustic segment began, Emma's composure had completely cracked. Security guard Michael Stevens, working the front sections that night, noticed the distressed child early in the evening. She stood out because everyone around her was having the time of their lives, but this little girl looked absolutely heartbroken, he recalled. Her father was trying to comfort her, but you could see he was struggling too. What Michael didn't know was that Emma was clutching her mother's letter in her small hands, the paper now damp with tears. She had read it dozens of times since arriving at the venue, hoping it would help her feel closer to her mother. Instead, it only reminded her of how alone she felt in this massive crowd. The letter read, "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, it means you're at the Queen concert we planned together. I know it's hard to be there without me, but I need you to understand something very important. Every note Freddie sings tonight, every word the crowd sings along with, carries a piece of love from every person who has ever found comfort in music. That includes me, sweetheart. When you hear our songs tonight, you're not just hearing Freddie Mercury, you're hearing every mother's lullaby, every family's joy, every heart that has ever been healed by the power of music. I am there with you, Emma. In every song, in every moment, in every beat of your heart that recognizes the beauty we shared together." But at 8 years old, Emma couldn't fully grasp the deeper meaning of her mother's words. All she knew was that the woman who had made these songs magical was gone, and nothing would ever sound the same again. That's when Freddie Mercury, from his position at the piano 70 yards away, locked eyes with this heartbroken little girl and felt something shift in his chest. Later, band members would describe this as the moment they saw Freddie transition from performer to healer. He stopped playing mid-chord, causing 72,000 people to fall into confused silence. Brian May, Roger Taylor, and John Deacon watched from their positions on stage, uncertain about what was happening, but trusting Freddie's instincts completely. "Ladies and gentlemen," Freddie announced, his voice carrying that familiar theatrical authority, but with an unusual gentleness. "I need everyone to be very quiet for a moment." The massive crowd complied immediately, creating an almost sacred silence in the enormous stadium. Freddie stood from his piano bench and walked to the edge of the stage, his eyes never leaving Emma Thompson. "There's someone in our audience tonight who needs our help," he continued, pointing in Emma's general direction. "A little angel who's carrying something too heavy for one person to bear alone." Emma looked up in shock, suddenly realizing that the man on stage, her mother's hero, the voice of their shared soundtrack, was looking directly at her. The crowd around her began turning to see who Freddie was addressing, but his gaze was so focused that there was no doubt about his target. "Music," Freddie said, his voice softer now, but still carrying clearly through the arena's sound system, "is supposed to heal. It's supposed to remind us that love never really ends. It just changes form and finds new ways to reach us." Concert photographer Dennis O'Malley, positioned in the pit between the stage and the front row, captured what happened next in a series of photographs that would later become iconic. As Freddie began walking through the crowd toward Emma, 72,000 people watched in fascination as their hero left the stage entirely to comfort one grieving child. Security personnel scrambled to create a path for him, but Freddie moved with purpose, stopping occasionally to touch hands or acknowledge fans, but never losing sight of his destination. The crowd watched in respectful silence, understanding instinctively that they were witnessing something extraordinary. When Freddie finally reached Emma's row, the little girl was trembling. She had gone from being invisible in a crowd of 72,000 to being the focus of one of the world's biggest rock stars. Her father, David, was equally overwhelmed, unsure how to process what was happening. "What's your name, little angel?" Freddie asked gently, kneeling beside Emma's seat so they could speak at eye level. "Emma," she whispered, her voice barely audible even to those sitting nearby. "Emma?" Freddie repeated, loud enough for his wireless microphone to pick up. "That's a beautiful name. Tell me, Emma, what brings you here tonight?" It was a simple question, but for Emma Thompson, it opened floodgates that had been building for months. Through tears and broken sentences, she began telling Freddie about her mother, about their shared love of Queen's music, about the promise she was trying to keep even though it hurt so much to be there without the person who had made these songs meaningful. The entire stadium listened in complete silence as this 8-year-old girl poured out her heart to a rock star who had somehow seen her pain from impossible distance. silence. Freddie listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or placing a reassuring hand on Emma's shoulder. "So you're here for your mummy?" Freddie said when Emma had finished her story, his own eyes now glistening with tears. "You're here because love doesn't stop just because someone goes to heaven." The crowd's response was immediate and overwhelming. Spontaneous applause erupted throughout the venue, not the wild cheering typical of rock concerts, but respectful, supportive appreciation for what they were witnessing. But Freddie wasn't finished. "Emma," he said, standing and gently helping her to her feet, "I want you to come with me. I want you to help me finish this concert, because tonight isn't just about Queen. Tonight is about the love that connects us all, the love that never dies, the love that your mummy is sending you through every note we play." What followed was unprecedented in concert history. Freddie Mercury, one of the most famous performers in the world, walked back to the stage with an 8-year-old girl beside him, while 72,000 people cheered them both with an emotional intensity that transcended typical concert energy. Once on stage, Freddie made an announcement that would create one of the most emotional moments ever captured at a live performance. "Ladies and gentlemen," he declared, his voice thick with emotion, "I want you to meet my friend Emma. She's here tonight for her mummy, who loved our music and is watching us from heaven. But I think her mummy would want Emma to know that love travels further than distance, and music connects hearts across any separation." The song Freddie chose for their performance was perfect. "Love of My Life," one of Queen's most emotionally powerful ballads, but he adapted it on the spot, turning it into a message from a daughter to her mother in heaven. "Emma," Freddie said softly, handing her a microphone, "sing this with me. Sing it for your mummy, so she knows that wherever she is, you love her and you remember everything she taught you." What happened next was pure magic. Emma's voice, small and sometimes shaky, joined with Freddie's trained vocals in a performance that transcended technical perfection and entered the realm of pure emotion. The crowd didn't just sing along. They created a massive chorus of support for one little girl's expression of love and loss. Video footage from that evening, later released as part of a charity compilation, shows something remarkable. As Emma sang, her posture changed, her shoulders straightened, her voice grew stronger, and for those few minutes, she wasn't a grieving child on stage with a rock star. She was a daughter sharing her love for her mother with 72,000 witnesses. The song ended to the longest standing ovation in Queen's concert history, but the story was far from over. As the applause finally died down, Freddie made one more gesture that would cement this moment in rock history. He removed his own necklace, a simple silver pendant that he wore during every performance, and placed it around Emma's neck. "Emma," he said, speaking directly to her but loud enough for everyone to hear, "I want you to keep this, and every time you look at it, I want you to remember that your mummy's love is still with you, that music is how love stays alive forever, and that you have 72,000 new friends who will never forget how brave you were tonight." The crowd erupted again, but this time, Emma was ready for it. She waved to the audience, tears still streaming down her face, but now they were tears of gratitude and connection, rather than loneliness and despair. What happened after the concert was equally remarkable. As word of the evening's events spread, offers of support began pouring in for the Thompson family. Fans who had witnessed the performance reached out through local media, offering friendship, pen pal relationships, and ongoing support for Emma as she grew up. A children's grief counseling organization used footage of the concert to help other children understand that their feelings of loss were valid and that communities could come together to support those who were hurting. But perhaps most importantly, Emma herself had been fundamentally changed by the experience. In interviews years later, she would say that Freddie's compassion had taught her that grief wasn't something to be hidden or endured alone, but something that could be transformed into connection when shared with others. "Freddie showed me that my sadness wasn't something wrong with me," Emma reflected in a 2010 interview on the 25th anniversary of the concert. "He showed me that missing my mum was actually a form of love, and that love could be shared and multiplied when other people witnessed it and responded with kindness." Emma Thompson grew up to become a music therapist, directly inspired by witnessing the healing power of Freddie's response to her childhood grief. She specializes in working with children who have lost parents, using music to help them process their emotions and maintain connections with their deceased loved ones. The necklace Freddie gave Emma that night became a treasured family heirloom. Emma kept it throughout her childhood and teenage years, and when she became a mother herself, she passed it on to her her own daughter, along with the story of the night a rock star taught her that love never really dies. The acoustic guitar Freddie used during that performance was later donated to a children's hospital in Manchester, where it's used by music therapists working with young patients facing serious illnesses. Dr. Patricia Williams, who witnessed the event, later wrote extensively about the therapeutic power of public compassion. What Freddie accomplished that night was remarkable from a clinical standpoint, she explained. He demonstrated that healing can happen in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the most powerful therapy is simply being seen and acknowledged by someone who cares. Queen's management initially worried that the emotional intensity of the Emma Thompson moment might overshadow their musical performance, but reviews from that evening universally praised it as one of the most moving concerts the band had ever given. Critics noted that the authentic emotion of the interaction had elevated the entire show to something transcendent. Freddie himself was deeply affected by the encounter. Band members reported that he talked about Emma for weeks afterward, and that the experience influenced his approach to connecting with audiences for the rest of his career. Freddie always had a gift for reading audiences, Brian May reflected years later, but that night with Emma taught him something new about the responsibility that comes with having a platform. He realized that his voice could do more than entertain. It could heal individual hearts in ways that rippled out to help entire communities. The story became part of Queen's unofficial history, passed down through fan communities and shared at tribute concerts. When the band was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Brian May mentioned the Emma Thompson concert in his acceptance speech, calling it an example of how music can create moments of grace that transcend entertainment. Perhaps most remarkably, the incident inspired other performers to be more aware of individual audience members who might need connection or support. Several major artists have since stopped concerts to acknowledge fans going through difficult times, citing Freddie's example as inspiration. The grief counseling organization that Emma's family worked with after the concert reported a surge in donations and volunteer applications in the weeks following the show. Local newspapers picked up the story, leading to increased awareness of childhood grief issues and inspiring new programs to help families navigate loss. Today there's a small memorial garden outside the hospital where Emma's mother died, dedicated to the memory of parents who have passed away but whose love continues to live through their children. A plaque in the garden reads, "Love of my life," in memory of Sarah Thompson and all the parents whose love echoes through music. Emma Thompson Williams, now a mother and music therapist, often tells her patients about the night Freddie Mercury taught her that grief shared is grief transformed. She uses the story to help other children understand that their pain is valid, that asking for help is brave, and that communities can come together to support those who are hurting. The bootleg recording of that concert remains one of the most treasured items in Queen's unofficial discography. Fans who want to experience the full emotional impact of that evening seek out the complete footage, which captures not just the musical performance but the profound human moment that occurred when a rock legend chose compassion over protocol. The Thompson family maintains contact with several fans who were present that night, forming lasting friendships that began with shared witness to an extraordinary moment of human connection. If this story moved you the way it moved those 72,000 people at Wembley Stadium, please hit that like button and share it with anyone who needs to be reminded that grief can be transformed into love when communities come together to support those who are hurting. What's the most powerful act of compassion you've ever witnessed during a time of loss? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible tales of how music can bridge any gap between human hearts. The magic of seeing and being seen continues here on our channel, where every story reminds us that behind every face in every crowd is a human being deserving of love, support, and the chance to be heard, especially when they're hurting most.